Going right.
I've heard from my grandmother Joni how she ended up in Mexico, but I'm not exactly sure, or I don't recall how your brother, my grandfather, Harlan, ended up in Mexico.
Well, you have to understand that my mother made all the major decisions in everybody's life. The nickname for her was
The general. They called her the general.
And when Harlan came back from the service, he just sat around. He didn't want to do anything. And
He was living at Gailey, at that same
and
house over in Gailey,
they were
wasn't
living
he?
in Westwood, so he was right close to the campus of UCLA. And so my mother tried to push him to go there. He didn't want to do that. And she wanted to push him to get a job. He didn't want to do that. And he just sat around. And that to my mother was anathema. So she went down to Clinton's Cafeteria.
Clifton's, right?
Clifton's,
Yeah.
Which had a big
Bulletin board?
bulletin board. And she saw a notice that some people were going to Mexico in the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 days or something like that. And we're looking for someone to help
Defray
pay
the expenses.
So she signs up Harlan. And she comes back and tells him, you're going to Mexico in 2 or 3 days. You speak Spanish. You always love speaking Spanish. And you can enroll in, you can finish your college at Mexico City College. She's got it all figured out. And sure enough, he was at a stage where he didn't know what he was doing, so anybody could push him anywhere. And she was a pusher par excellence. And so that's what he did. That's how he got to Mexico. She signed him up with I don't know, whoever was going. And told him, you like speaking Spanish anyway?
How did he know Spanish already?
Just in high school.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so she pushed him and he went. At that time, you could push him in any direction. He didn't know what he wanted to do, and he was, I don't know, odds and ends with himself.
And how long did he spend in Mexico?
Well, he went to Mexico City College and he graduated. And I don't remember if he stayed for a master's or not. I don't even remember if they gave masters at that time. And that's where he met Joni. And so they got married, and, so the whole course of his life changed. So, but it was my mother always doing, she just pushed people all over, and that's the way they went.
That would have been around 1947, because Jeff was born in Mexico in 1948.
What surprised me?
And then they moved back here right around maybe 1950, 51. He started with Pan American in 1952.
Pan American was his whole life for so many years.
It was a marvelous, marvelous company, at least in the early days. There was a fraternity all over the world of Pan American employees.
Well, it gave him just what he needed.
And yet, he made some very, very poor decisions. It seems to me that he did not have the ability to make good decisions. And he made some very, very poor decisions.
He wasn't alone in that.
Well, I think that that's one of the things that hopefully parents should give you. One of the most important things that parents can do for a child is to give them the ability to make good decisions, and to give them that option of knowing that the parent's always there to help you make good decisions. And
Well, I was the reckless one. I always just jumped on something come along, and I said, well, that's it, do that.
well, for instance, he jumped on the decision to go to Guam.
You know what?
To go to Guam.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than to stay in Los Angeles. And he had a great situation in Los Angeles. But he listened to people that said, look, if you really want to get ahead in the organization, you've got to go international. You have to get international experience.
And I heard that kids were mad at him for that, or resented having to.
That was not the real bad one. That was part one. We were all, including my mother, ecstatic at coming back to San Francisco because my father had been told it was just going to be a 2-year stint in Guam. It was 5 years. And we were ecstatic when we came back to San Francisco. And what you may not be aware of is there was a fellow by the name of Ed Young who was the station manager for Pan American in San Francisco. Ed Young loved my dad. He took him under his wing and told my dad, I'm going to retire in a couple of years and I'm going to make sure that you are the station manager. I'm going to make sure you get my job when I retire. The rest of everything would have turned out so much differently if my dad had heeded those words. Most people in Pan American worldwide would have given their right arm to be the station manager of Pan American in San Francisco.
Yeah, he plush job.
But you remember the name Angie Arinell? Is that in the recesses of your mind? Angie Arinell was my godfather. The Arinells were the closest friends my family had when they were living in Los Angeles. And Angie Arinell loved my father like a young brother, another person that took him under his wing. Angie Arinell rose through the ranks and was vice president of Pan American at headquarters in New York City. When my father came back to San Francisco, and we'd only been here about 6 months, everybody was so happy. Mom was getting plugged in. My grandfather, my mom's dad, had moved up to San Francisco into our guest bedroom, had moved in with us. And Angie Arinell said to my dad, you know, Pico, you need to not stay in San Francisco. You need to do one of two things if you want to climb the corporate ladder. You either need to come to headquarters in New York, and you'll be on your way up the ladder. My dad said, that's a non-starter. He said, or you'll need to get some more international experience. But if you stay in San Francisco, that's where you're going to end your career in San Francisco. You won't go anywhere other than that. And for some reason, my father heeded the siren song, and that's how he ended up in the Virgin Islands.
I remember
And that embittered
I remember
all
how
of us.
happy everybody was
That
about that.
embittered all of us. And Mother said he never even consulted her. He just told her it's a done deal. The way he broached the subject with her was rather than ask her opinion, he said, have you told your dad yet? And she said, told him what? That we're leaving, so he's going to have to move back to Los Angeles. And she says, what do you mean we're leaving? He says, oh, I took a job in the Virgin Islands. That's how she found out about it.
Very considerate husband, I must say. Oh boy.
That was a really bad decision, and it had really bad ramifications for our family. But again, nobody was really happy in the Virgin Islands, and that was bad. And my parents' marriage suffered a lot. My father got involved with a number of different women down there and worked very, very long hours and didn't like his children, and it was not a good period in our family.
Well, you never know what else you inherit when you get married. And then besides your partner. Let that be a warning for me.
Well, I mean, I think that that's probably the reason that my children have not gotten more involved seriously with females has been because they've seen the warning signs. I saw, when I was a teenager, I saw my parents' marriage, and I was very, very rebellious. I mean, I had seething anger inside of me growing up, my adolescence. And I saw my parents' marriage, and as a seething teenager, I mean, I wasn't a straight kid at all. I was really kind of getting out there and filled with bitterness. But I saw my parents' marriage, and I said, I am never going to have a marriage like that. I remember thinking that when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, I am going to treat my children a lot differently than my father treated me. And this is when I was doing drugs and pretty wild. I remember saying, I'm going to be a real good dad because I'm going to tell my children how much I love them. I'm going to tell my children how proud of them I am because these were things I didn't get from my father. So. But my parents, and this is where I was getting back to saying that parents need to give direction. My parents never gave me direction. I had to learn everything on my own. They never said, what are your plans? Let me give you some advice. You know, they never got involved with my life. They basically just let me do whatever I wanted to do. And children need to have direction. They need to know that their parents are involved in their life and concerned and interested. They need to have their parents' wisdom. And I had to figure it all out by myself, and that's why I made one bad decision after another. Because my parents either didn't care or for whatever reason, they just never got involved. So I chose where I went to college. The only thing my father told me was no college would accept me. But other than that, he never asked any questions about college. I had to do everything on my own. When I got involved with females, they never said, gee, we don't think she's your type, or what are your plans for the future, or any of that. It was, whatever you do is fine.
Yeah.
And that wasn't what I needed. I needed
Yeah.
direction.
Well, so you didn't make that kind of mistake. You made others, and so when he's ready to get married, he'll think, you know, oh, my father gave me this, but he didn't give me that. There's no way that, I don't know how anybody winds up being a perfect parent. Although all in all, I give Pappy pretty high marks for being a good parent. There were areas that he failed me in, but
Oh yeah, what was that poem that you recited the other night? That was fantastic. The one about where can a man find the... That was terrific.
Where can a man find a cap for his knee, or a key to the locks of his hair? Can his eyes be called an academy because there are pupils there? What gems are found in the crown of his head? Who travels the bridge of his nose? Can he, when shingling the roof of his house, use the nails on the ends of his toes? Can the crook of his elbow be sent to jail? If so, what did he do? How can he sharpen his shoulder blades? I'll be hanged if I know, do you? Can he sit in the shade at the palm of his hand? Can he beat on the drums of his ear? Can the calf on his leg eat the corn on his toe? I'll let you take it from here.
That is absolutely extraordinary.
I just always loved poetry. I like writing it, I like reading it.
But I'm saying he created... That was his poem, correct? He originated that poem, didn't he? Whose poem was that?
Mine.
Oh, you were the one that came up with that poem. See, I thought you were reciting Pappy's poem.
No.
That's something that's original to you?
Yeah.
That's terrific. When did you come up with that?
I don't know, some years ago.
Some years ago, it's kind of like saying he lives in the valley. I mean...
I really don't even know.
Well, I'm saying, were you in your 20s or 50s, or... That's amazing.
Many years ago, I don't know.
That's such good poetry that could be in a book. You know what it reminds me of? Ogden Nash. Do you remember Ogden Nash
Of
would
course.
always write those real witty poems?
Of course, I used to get a kick out of it.
The only one I remember of Ogden Nash is a 1L llama is a priest, a 2L llama is a beast, but I will bet a silk pajama there isn't any 3L llama.
Yeah.
But that's what it reminds me of. That poem reminds me of Ogden Nash. It's so whimsical and so clever. Pappy wrote lots of poetry.
Hmm?
Pappy, your father, wrote lots of poetry.
I know it. So did his daughter.
I didn't know Marianne wrote poetry.
I mean me.
I knew. That was in jest.